Welcome back, everybody. It's Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. You know what that means. It's time for another Orange Card, Blue Card podcast. I, of course, am your host, Sam Tate. I am joined by your world champion, the greatest of all time, Kevin Broberg. Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the show.
Yeah, and I have a very, very special treat for you guys. If you have not been following along on the live streams the last couple days, I've been doing these deck overviews, if you will, these little deck profiles. So I'm going to have Kevin do kind of a live one because he's got more insight than I do on it. So take it away whenever you're ready, Kevin.
Yeah, we got the Midnight deck that I won the world championship with, and I talked to the team a little bit in some of these interviews that I did at Worlds about kind of the genesis of this deck. This is very much inspired by Pippa, and kind of the guts of the deck are really Indiscriminate Shock, 1.3 million volts, and Dark Shadow Ruin, backing up with and some Dark Shadow, kind of backed up for damage by Home Run Comet and Ice Storm, and then kind of utility value out of Command Pigeon Flock. And then this kind of combo of Command Pigeon Flock with Friend of Animals as well as successful results really just like solves every problem you can have. So if you have uh, like the most frequent bread and butter really is like you play Command Pigeon Flock and you fetch a Friend of Animals and you commit Friend of Animals to Midnight's Enhance. And all of a sudden that's an 8-speed high for 5 that puts a momentum in your pocket. So if you have another ally in your discard pile, you can get that as from a playable committed enhance on Friend of Animals. And so even just with that right there alone, if you have a home run counter in your hand, that's already, I want to say, 10 damage. And you never will actually send it for 10 damage because it gets 1 to its powerful rating for each high or charge in your card pool. And then you get a momentum from home run comet, you get a momentum from Friend of Animals, 2 momentum, powerful 3, 10 damage. But now if you play another attack, so say you play a 1.3 million volts first, and say you already had a momentum from before, all of a sudden that's now a powerful 4 with 3 momentum. That's 16 damage. If you have 2 momentum, that's 20 damage. If you have a third attack in your card pool, a fourth attack in your card pool, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It scales up very rapidly, and you can even quickly onto like even turn 2, turn 3, already in a situation where if your opponent ever blocks anything and taps out, they're going to be menaced by a 6-speed home run comet for their life total from almost any position. And so you play an 8-speed high Command Pigeon Flock, and you kind of just have to take that on the chin. But after I take that Command Pigeon Flock on the chin, now I'm getting my momentum going, and now I'm getting without losing any tempo in my staging area, without losing any progress in my staging area, without sacrificing any resources almost even. And plus, I got to do Midnight's Filter during that in hack, and kind of that's really how the game plan goes. We're trying to bully people, really. We're trying to attack them with crazy fast attacks and just this threat of unspeakable violence backing it up. Dark Shadow Ruin's a 9 damage attack. Indiscriminate Shock is going to be enormous. All these powerful attacks. And UA High can fetch either Dark Shadow Ruin or Summon Dark Shadow. And also, Summon Dark Shadow can pull +3 to a check out of our pocket. So even on a small staging area, we can actually pass these checks to play these. Even these kind of heavyweight 5 difficulty attacks, Summon Dark Shadow helps us turn a handful of attacks into actually a card pool full of attacks that's going to be presenting lethal damage. And it even adds a little bit of extra speed and damage on it on top of passing and control checks. And I think that's a high level overview. I think a lot of the foundations can kind of make sense in that context. If you look at the difficulty sort, we have a lot of spams just because the spams on the symbol are so incredibly high quality. We have like 11 zero diffs. So when we built the deck, I always had 3x release, but I put 1 in the sideboard since I knew I was player 1, and on my kind of brainstorming what to sideboard out, I notated down just like we have a lot of spams, you just cut a spam. And so I said, well, if I'm player 1, I'm not going to be behind, I'm not going to be defending quite as much as I will be as player 2. And so let me sideboard out that release for game 1 because I have that option, because I know it's going to happen. Kind of one of the concerns with this deck is just that if you don't draw these home run comets, don't draw the ice storms, or you just draw the wrong ones basically, and your opponent is defending very well, it can be a little bit sketchy to actually have the damage output to finish the game off. Or like if you can't get 4 cards in your card pool for home run count, or if you know they can actually defend home run count thanks to a speed reset or a plus ultra, then you want to be able to actually make meaningful progress. So if you're just taking them with electric jolts and ice storms for 4 damage, it's hard to actually close the game out. And so we've got basic training and Spirit Referee and One with Nature, all as additional damage sources out of our stage. I'm losing steam on my ability to completely monologue what's going on with this deck. Is this all making sense?
No, this is great. This is awesome. There's so much, like, it's the kind of thing that I think for a lot of players who have been around, it might seem really obvious, but hearing from someone who knows better, right? Hearing from someone who has results can really like hammer home people who might be on the fence about things like I've given people grief in my deck profiles already about like having Ice Storm and Cheerful Uppercut together, but they had Frigid Heatwave, right? So like,
sure.
You know, finding out that there are reasons to mix these things up, like finding out that like Breaker and Card Pool Clogging aren't always the same is really good. I did want to comment on the UA High because I've been talking this card up for a long time. I've been upset that a lot of people aren't running it. And I think if you're playing Summon Dark Shadow, it's actually just super amazing to have a 3 difficulty. You know, it's a 3/4, but I think it's just absolutely worth it to snap a Summon Dark Shadow so often. But in this deck, it also grabs Command Pigeon Flock and Dark Shadow Ruin. And I'm pretty sure Friend of Animals is like one of the most integral parts of this engine, right?
Very much so, yeah. So one lens I think is useful to look at this deck through is just kind of the raw card count, right? So I know in one of the I think between rounds and at Worlds maybe or something, we talked and we said, well, what's a weakness of the Chaos Symbol? And I think one thing it's not very good at is it doesn't have a card like Passing the Torch. If you want to just get your resource game going and just snowball more and more resources, you don't really have the tools to do that. You have a 6-hand size, and that's what you get each time. And what you get to do with the UA High that I find the most valuable is just that it's a card you can put in your stage that doesn't make you overextended. Or it can bail you out if you overextend. If you build out 5 cards in your hand, you hold 1 block, that's a scary place to be in. You can easily get beaten up really badly. But if you have UA High in your stage, that represents either a mid block or a high block. So on top of just having 1 more card, you also get to choose what zone it's going to be on to block with. But that's very good at passing blocks. You can pass 3 blocks pretty often. And UA High, on top of I think it's great on offense. It's got a nice static. If you want to find like those low blocks, you just have it as passive value. Static's good, but really the value is if your opponent's extending to try to finish the game off, this lets you get that Dark Shadow Ruin, Breaker 1, or it lets you get critically a lot of assets. You know, the weakness they don't help you pass control checks, but if you're passing 1 more block to live, you can fetch Summon Dark Shadow and it's virtually -2 speed.
Yeah, I think for the decks that aren't going over 60 cards, Tokoyami's had to go to like 55 minimum just because there is a little bit of a mill out issue, but they're always on like Frigid Heatwave, which is notoriously like the only card advantage card for Chaos pretty much. You get like ramrodded into specific lineups when you need all those ranged attacks. So I think a big thing is when I look at UA High, I think of the static on play because games aren't going to go super long anyways, and it's nowhere near as good as if it was actually on play. But I think that if there was a foundation that was printed that said after you play this card you can draw a card and discard a card, everybody would want to run it as long as it has a useful ability from the stage. And tutor from your discard pile is insane.
Yeah, it's crazy good, right? If you think one thing I often think of is my deck is about 1/3 attacks, right? I think it actually might be exactly 1/3 attacks. And so if you draw 6 cards, expectation, obviously you don't hit the middle, don't hit the bullseye every time on the most average draw or whatever. On average, you'll draw 2 attacks. If you have a hand with 2 attacks already in it, you draw 4 cards in your draw step. That's 1 attack and change. You can't be disappointed if you only draw 1 attack in that situation. UA High means there's an attack sitting in your stage as soon as you want to use it, and that just opens up the space of how likely you are to be able to finish a game off if you get an opening, if your opponent gives you an opening. And that was actually really the story of my match against Tim Keefe, was that I got to stick UA High. Actually, in game 1, I terrain ruled him. He played UA High. I played my UA High, his. And then in game 2, again, I just stuck UA high. It just sat in play, and it completely informed the dynamic of what we were doing. He had a tempo advantage. He was player 1 that game. But because he couldn't ever risk overextending into UA high, I got to buy time until I wound up in a position where I had a pretty comfortable 4 skill.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely think that the more I have played with it, I do think it is actually better suited for a 6-hand size character. And I really wish I had worked on like a hybrid Tokoyami Midnight deck if there's one that exists out there, because there is a handful of attacks that are very similar. And you know, if we get to a world where Tokoyamis are playing Command Pigeon Flock, I think we're actually in trouble.
Like, in trouble because the game is too toxic somehow, or in trouble because we're having too much fun?
Well, because it means that they have really nice synergistic effects. Because right now, Tokoyami decks are pretty much just trying to lay out their hand, discard the cards that they can't play on offense, and just really numbers you to death. But once Tokoyami players discover that there is sauce in this game, we're fucked.
Yeah, I remember Tam trying to convince me to play Chaos Tokoyami before Nationals, and clearly he had the right idea. But I had been informed by, I want to say, Andrew Holder did a video of like all of the provisional store championship decks, and someone had played a Chaos Tokoyami with UA high and 0 gravity and cheerful uppercut, and I was in love with that deck. I wanted to play like 4 petty squabbles just to tap my opponent's stuff down and just like cheerful uppercut the crap out of him. And he was like, "Nah, man, you just like kill him." I'm like, "Sounds lame. I don't want to do that."
Yeah, well, I mean,
I didn't work out that hard, but
when the sauce and the strength come together, that's usually the best decks of all, because when you're really into playing a deck, I think people do play it better. And I think that's why, you know, you can see decks are really strong and people do put time into it. It's not just that they pick it up immediately, but there does seem to be a correlation with people playing decks that they really like doing well and people playing decks that they don't like but are really strong and kind of floundering out. Would you say this is a deck that you really enjoyed playing?
I mean, I did. So it's hard to separate the winning from the enjoying.
That is tough.
I think this isn't a deck I necessarily love losing with, which is a deck which has been. I've had decks where I'm completely content to finish the game and discover that I've lost. And I just really enjoyed that. But like one thing that this deck gets to do really well, and I haven't played a lot of 7-handers in the My Hero format because I hate going second and getting roasted. And Midnight really gets to kind of pretend to be vulnerable. She gets to play a lot of chicken, and she gets to be really good at like letting you think you can attack her, but you're not actually good to attack her, or letting you kind of having some vulnerability, but not really being that vulnerable. And like 28 life is a lot of life to deal. It's hard to put together an attack string like that. And if I can predict that you really want to do an attack string, I can then defend it very well. But if I think you're like kind of lukewarm on attacking, I can kind of really push my luck and say, well, I got 1 card in my hand. What are you gonna do about it, right?
Yeah, whenever I play against Midnight, I find out how many keywords my attacks have really quick. And spoiler, it's usually 3.
Yeah, it's usually 3.
She has definitely been blessed with the keyword spaghetti. I think too. A lot of what's helping her out is stun attacks that also have EX that also have charge. Like almost every attack in this deck has at least one trait, like a defensive keyword ability and then like an offensive keyword ability. I mean, Dark Shadow Rune gains stun. This is, does she say printed actually? I don't even know if she says printed.
No, she does not. Yeah, so if you have Easily Excited, just to highlight that card that's not necessarily the most obvious, you give it Taunt, and then you can also use Midnight's Enhance, which then counts that taunt keyword. So if you have to have another source of speed than Midnight's own Enhance, but if you have Easily Excited plus basic training, for instance, you can give Ruin speed and damage and the taunt keyword. Then it's received both bonuses, so it gets 3 damage and stun 1. And now, if you did that, if you just do Ruin into Summon Dark Shadow, 5 high for 9, stun 1. If you did Easily Excited, 6 high for 9, stun 1, taunt. Then you commit 1 foundation that's 5 keywords.
And it might be Friend of Animals.
And if it's Friend of Animals, it's a 12 speed high Dark Shadow Ruin that promises more to come in that attack string. Right? You have a summon that doesn't have to progress, particularly giving you extra stats. It's a beefy attack. Dark Shadow Rune is not a small card.
Mhm.
It's almost double-digit damage on its own, or with just 1+1.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's nasty.
I've had my eyes on the command pigeon flock, sort of a setup for a minute, and it's interesting because I thought the character that was really going to break it was actually Momo. Picking up a study group leader from your discard pile seemed really strong. She's already a character that's building things from her discard pile, right, or acquiring them, I guess, from the discard pile, depending on how you go about it. She's a character who benefits from committing things a lot, using rescue completed from the stage. So I was really expecting that to be the deck where, like, now we just have all the stats. Now we have momentum tutors. That's also a good home run comment deck. Was there any, being statistically the best Momo player, was there a lot of overlap, you think, from a deck similar, like, six-handers who have plus and minus speed, and then you got to find the damage from these big enders and momentum tutors? Is there any overlap there?
I think they're more different than they appear, really. And I do think there is some similarity there. Like Momo, and I mean, I'm sure Envious in this deck. Like, I'm playing this awkward UA high card to like look what it takes to mimic a fraction of Momo's power. Um, I sure wish I could tutor for home run comments like I can in Momo. But like, I mean, one critical difference is that Momo doesn't commit foundation on her face. She has to play a pretty clunky 5-diff attack in home run comment, or not in home run, Cannon Blast to commit one, or she has to assemble training weights, which is already a thing you want to be doing in your deck. But once you're saying, well, I'm going to kind of tread water and stall time for training weights, you want to tread water and stall time to have a handful of 5 attacks and 25 foundations in your stage. So you just training weights everything and just bury them completely under this avalanche of damage. I think like just command pigeon flock fetching friended animals doesn't seem super compelling to be in Momo. I guess you could do like rescue completed stuff there too as well. But I mean, I think a big thing too is that if you're playing Momo, if I'm trying to do command pigeon flock stuff, and my opponent has a speed reset in play, I just have to deal with it. I don't get to use electric jolt. I don't get to use petty squabbles or irrefutable force of nature. I just have to be prepared to just run through whatever I face with just completely overwhelming force. And also, I mean, in this metagame, Momo's defense isn't good enough anymore. I play against Ojiro, and I get to play 3 or 4 turns of the game, but they're losing turns the whole time, and it's really difficult to actually defend against that deck just because you get a critical mass of speed, and it just sucks. And also the match of Midnight into Momo, I actually tested with Tim before we had a dojo day, we called it, where we all just got together and played some games. And I pulled Momo on. I said, well, let's fight Midnight, and he beats me in game 1. And he started. We just first sideboards. Hey, let's not do sideboards right now. Let's just play the game again. And he beats me like 3 more times. And I'm like, yeah, this is hopeless. I can't beat this deck. Its speed is way too much, and its defense is way too solid for me to actually feel competitive.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Momo is still super great at the reducing speed, blocking a ton of stuff, sort of. I guess it's not really a game plan to just say you can block and survive, but it's so weird to me that she has fallen out of grace so hard, but at the same time she doesn't have like the consistent dunks that Chaos has. We saw in game 2 of Grand Finals, you cannot let your guard down, because even on turn 2 with just a couple foundations, just 3-5 difficulty attacks is 30 damage.
Yeah. When things break the right ways, and you kind of get back, your hand tells you, "Hey, you should try check some 5s now." Try check some 5s and check all the 5s. That's the. I remember I had been asked when Set 3 came out, like, "Oh look, all these cards for Midnight. Midnight's gonna support." I saw Command Pigeon Flock plus Home Run Comet, and I'm a big Home Run Comet fan. And I said, "Well, how can I build a Midnight deck?" And I just couldn't find anything I felt comfortable that I didn't feel would be effective. Right? I thought it'd take too long. It'd be too kind of mid-range, I guess, for want of a better term. It would be forced to play at a too slow of a pace. And if my opponent wants to play at a faster pace, I wouldn't be able to keep up with them ever. But then I saw Pippa said, "Well, what if we play Summon Dark Shadow? What if we play the Tokoyami kit? Summon Dark Shadow Ruin, and at Nationals, she was playing with Twisting Azure Inferno, and that kind of got caught in the crossfire of the deck list. That ended up on for the other 4 different attacks in here, Electric Jolt and Ice Storm. But that explosive power was very much something I like. It's something I very much like having in decks, right? I think a lot of people played Momo as like a turn 5, turn 6, turn 10 game deck, and getting to play the game where we're going to force in these home run comets off of Back Alley Haymaker was a big kind of innovation for that deck. But even that, that's not caught up with the level of defense people are playing today either. So
yeah, it's really interesting that it's really interesting to me that you mention Pippa, because I was supposed to give Pippa a shout out at one point to make fun of Tamron Cardwell for talking shit about Midnight, and then and then I completely forgot to. But when you mentioned her in the winners interview, I was happy for her because she is one of the coolest deck builders in the community, and we're all really rooting for her at the top cuts for Dallas Nats. So it is nice to see at least some iteration of the deck, succeed. I do see that.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
I was just gonna say, I see you still have the congratulations balloons behind you. Have you been celebrating all week? What's the celebration?
No, these are celebration balloons from what's Monday night when I got back. My dad picked me up at the airport and had balloons for me, and it was I was completely unduly happy about it. I was driving. I was riding in the car. They were hitting me in the face because I was sitting in the front seat. And it wasn't a huge car. And I was so happy to have balloons hitting me in the face. They're barely getting inflated, and let's think about them soon. But I'm keeping them around until then.
Yeah, I saw earlier in the main Discord, Tim Keefe had posted his title belts up as decoration in his in his living room, I guess. There, are you still have the check? Are you gonna frame the check?
The check is in the mail. We had it shipped back rather than trying to take it on the plane.
Oh, come on, man! They gotta understand that at the airport, right? You show up to the airport, you're like, "Come on, what am I supposed to do? Check bag this?"
I don't know. I felt too conspicuous, and then also too likely to get wet or damaged or something.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess. Yeah. Go ahead.
One other thing I wanted to highlight in this deck list too. So I mentioned briefly, that we have a lot of good spams, right? We have basic training. I'm sure I know we've talked about a bunch. Easily Excited is great synergy with Midnight, especially where you can play and you kind of so much footsie and so much pressure you can put on your opponents with this deck. And when you're using these speed enhances, enhances responses, can kind of try to send a message or you get a lot of value of keeping your opponents guessing and trying to get reads on them. If they want to block an attack, then you put speed on it. If they don't want to block the attack, you don't need to bother expending the resources on it. What I was going to say was that, first of all, I mentioned the kind of card advantage angle. This deck has only 3 foundations at 4 of, and 2 of them are 1-diffs, both Chivalrous Competitor and Struggling with Studies. And these are both, the 1-diffs are both just so important in terms of just that card advantage game, that extra resources, and making the most out of those, I think, is a very big part of playing this deck well. Chivalrous Competitor, drawing extra cards on offense is such a huge deal because you get to do double that effect, but with Midnight. Then you draw the card as foundation, you cycle it into another attack, into trying to find another attack, or another Summon Dark Shadow. And then Struggling with Studies just says, if you pass the turn with only a Dark Shadow Rune in your hand, that's actually representing, multiple Breaker 1 blocks. And Midnight can pass them thanks for speed reduce. And I think Struggling with Studies is a broken card, honestly. I think it is overpowered. They shouldn't have made a card this strong. But while it's legal, I'm gonna rock it. And one of my low-key favorite things about this deck is that if you look, there's not a ton of cards that say Deadlock on them. Right. There's Ice Storm, famous Deadlock, even better when you put a ton of speed on it. Tim was very high on this. He was playing 4, and I know he won at least one of his games in the round of 32 against Andrew Davale, thanks to this Deadlock ability saying, I'm crazy fast, I'm powerful, and you cannot stop me. But then it's also got 2 copies of successful results. And that's really 7 copies if you want to count the tutor chains. You can fetch something on Pigeon Flock. And then successful results both plays great in Deadlock, where you get a momentum that's going to be a powerful, maybe powerful three, at least powerful three, probably powerful 4 or 5 sometimes. And then also lets you ready your friends and animals or your Spirit Referee. And Spirit Referee has been a card that I think Tim played one main, one side in his deck. It's been a card that I've certainly had 2 copies in this deck before, especially when we were playing Twisting Azure Inferno. It's really powerful to be able to put 2 more damage on stuff when you're putting this much speed on them. And then you can ready it with either successful results Deadlock or with requesting assistance. And this deck, like, you get only a couple shots of requesting assistance, but you're very reliable at getting that momentum thanks to your poke game and Friend of Animals. And it's really powerful to be able to just double up on a Friend of Animals and put that on one more ability on the turn. And those 2 cards, just requesting successful results, also just help this deck play on a low foundation count when it's an early game you're trying to push in if that happens to come up. So I just want to highlight that little package. And successful results also just is a surprisingly powerful defensive resource too. I know there was a point where I was tapped out completely against Dan Nelson. He hit me with stun 6. He played Giant Ice Wall, Spent Momentum, Giant Ice Wall, and then played some Azure Infernos. But because I got to ready, I had 3 momentum and a Friend of Animals in my stage. So I got to just ready successful results on every attack that turn. And I was able to use Midnight's Speed Enhance together with Summon Dark Shadow on defense to actually just path all those blocks even as I check freeze.
Wild. Okay. Yeah, successful results has been one that I've been super iffy on because if you only have 1 momentum, it's just strictly worse than requesting assistance, right? Most of the time it's, it's very different, but you can commit requesting assistance. You can't commit successful results to shut it off. So that's been, that's been super interesting because I don't find room for this card very often. But in a stun heavy meta, and if your character needs to commit a foundation for a resource, that makes that completely shifts what the question is, right? When you're talking between the 2 cards.
Yeah, and just a lot of games with this deck, you'll poke them on turn 2 or 3, poke them on turn 4, and then on turn 5, you'll have a hand with 3 or 4 attacks in it, and you'll be trying to calculate how to push in for the kill, even with all these 5 diff, even with the commit 1 cost on Midnight and a discriminate shock, and being able to just turn that momentum from previous attack strings into additional Midnight activations, to additional control check insurance is just really actually super valuable. I fetch successful results command Pigeon Flock more frequently than you might expect. It's not like a once in a blue moon thing. It's something I actually look for if I don't have one yet.
Awesome. I only have one more question about this deck. Do you have anything else you want to say about it?
I mean, I could probably talk forever.
Right. That's true. I guess I shouldn't phrase it that way. Is there anything you think that the people need to know? Is there anything that's a burning desire that they should really know about this deck?
Probably not. I guess shout out to Somnambulism. That card's busted. I don't know. It's so good. Just free wins. I don't know.
I was gonna ask, how often did you actually break that card out? Because we didn't see it in your match against Bromley, which I imagine game 2 you probably would have brought it in against an Eraserhead. No.
That's one of those matchups where I felt in the past, and maybe this. I mean, even I think Bromley's deck was more aggressive than most, and against aggressive decks in general, you really need. It's kind of like a welcome. It's your trump when the game's on turn 10, and I'm not sure I'm going to get there against a super aggressive deck. So it's even less so. But I guess Racer in general, I've played both sides of that matchup a bit, and just Command Pigeon Flock for Friend of Animals is just really gnarly to respond to. 6 speed is challenging, right? The deck doesn't necessarily have a ton of +1 high blocks. And it's 6 after you give it -2 with Eraserhead. And if you just spend Erase on Midnight on every attack, I'm playing here's my 5 diff, completely non-committal poke, and you're going to erase me on that, and then discard a card to get the erase back, and then spend a card in your hand. You're annihilating your whole hand. You're spending your whole hand on this. You're not sculpting at all at that point. And I'm even on resources, right? I'm paying 5 diff for a good foundation. That's a fine rate when it's also crushing your hand that much. And if Eraserhead ever starts to look like he's tapping out. If he ever goes to low count cards in his hand, I've got this zone mix up going. I've got these huge attacks that are going to threaten to end his life total real fast. And it's just really hard to navigate for a racer. If he wants to wall up, I just run way out ahead of him. I think in my game one against Bromley, I was in like knee deep in deadlock, and he was at like 7 or 8 foundations. And if he wants to try to turn it into a coin flip, well, his offense isn't that good, and I've got 28 life and interaction. I've got Irrefutable Force of Nature. I've got UA High can fetch stuff. I've got Petty Squabbles response. I can side in more Petty. I certainly sided more Petty Squabbles in that matchup. Against Bromley's deck anyway. But yeah, like Somnambulism, I was certainly very happy to bring it in against Recovery Girl, but I think that was the only time I ended up bringing it in. Yeah, I thought about it a little bit as a breaker one against Euro, but decided against.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, see, that's why I love doing this podcast, because just looking at this list, and even when we did the commentary, over the weekend, that's a character that, like, we saw Bloodcurdle do a ton of work against when Andrew Holder was playing Fourth Kind. He just Bloodcurdles Eraserhead, explores his entire asshole, draws a map and sells it to tourists. And so it's the kind of thing where, you assume that that's like great for that matchup because it worked for a different deck. But hearing, your thoughts on it is just, I don't know. That's why I do this, to help people learn, the reasons behind what we do.
Yeah, I think I'd probably bring in Sumnum against like a Void Eraserhead who was a little slower and a little bit, maybe more like was playing a thicker stack of defensive resources than Bromley's deck was. If I had to deal with like a bunch of the like 1,000,002 diffs that are out there, right? Like a bunch of fulfilled my duties and a bunch of, I don't even know off the top of my head all the nonsense. I know there's a ton of nonsense Void Eraser can get up to in terms of defensive tricks. If I deal with all that crap, I'd be like, let me just Somnon, tap your face. You can throw your tricks at me after that, but I've got enough attacks. I'm going to finish the job.
Okay, yeah. So like the Eraserhead that a lot of people expect, but we actually did see all 3 flavors of Eraserhead over the 2 days. We saw All Symbol played by Corey Aguilard, which was a very interesting treat, and then we saw, I think, 2 Void Eraserheads on day 2 and 2 Death Eraserheads. The 2 Void ones were very different. One was like a weapons discard deck, and one was like kicks. And then the Death decks were 1 card different, but they were very much like I'm going to take you to Pound Town, here's a bunch of speed and damage, Grenadier Bracers for the win. And, we didn't get to see that.
Quad Grenadier Bracers was not on my bingo card.
What?
It was Quad Grenadier Bracers was not on my bingo card for what would show up at the HLC.
It's kind of funny because I've been fooling around with this Death Toga deck for, or at least up until like I played Life Toga at Pasadena.
Oh, is this the Gravedigger?
A little, yeah. So it started out as the Gravedigger. I tried a couple different, but it's the Gravedigger Toga, which became the Alleyway Ambush Life Toga. After I played Wall Toga, like there's so many different iterations that was floating around on fun stuff. But every time I got done playing the Death Toga, I thought this is just better as a Eraserhead. The whole time I was like...
Yeah, the Erase is a really nice trick.
Yeah, like I was just like, I can do so much of what I'm doing with this 1 speed if I just had 2 speed and I just had like an extra turn to get there. And so it was really cool to see like this version come out, because it's also this kind of idea. The first time I heard it was like as a 13 deck. It was on the air symbol where we're playing like what is it? Extendo Hair is like the kill card. It's like Extendo Hair into Fierce Whirlwind, because you commit your whole board and then you destroy your whole board, right? And it works really good in Deadlock, actually, if you get the numbers right and you get the +5 tier check from Extendo Hair, etc. But 13 just didn't have enough gas. So then we tried Ida 1, and like it feels like this deck, the Bromley and Jose Eraserhead deck, was like wiping the slate clean of all these crazy ass ideas and went, okay, how do we just like distill it, And so I really wanted to watch it pop off, but it wasn't in the cards. Speaking of, I guess that's a good enough transition. You also played Eraserhead this weekend. Or actually, do you want to talk about the sideboard at all? I guess we didn't talk about the sideboard.
Of Midnight. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
talked a little
I
bit
mentioned,
somnambulism.
yeah, I mentioned release. Typically I would play this main, but I thought, given that I'm in the special privilege of second seed in after Swiss, I can do a little bit of pre-sideboarding as game one. I prefer to have a little lower of a spam count. This is a little bit less important. It's an incredibly good card. There's a lot of speed flying around this format, even with Midnight. You're, not deep on stun resilience. You basically have successful results that just turns momentum into stun resilience. So having more effective speed hit is very useful there. Shock Treatment is a great card. It can certainly be in the main deck. It just has a mid block. I have block a little bit light, a little bit over heavy on mid, and a little bit light on the other two zones. And so this one wound up at the sideboard rather than, especially with like Electric Jolt making its way into the main deck. I kind of had a pretty decent amount of coverage, but if my opponent's playing a lot of things that I want to tap, this comes in. Some Dark Shadow is kind of a, certainly the Sexbent had four Some Dark Shadows in it at a bunch of points. Very good card, very kind of what we want to be doing. But if you want to be race carring even harder, this comes in pretty easily. And if you just want to like a higher critical mass as well, in some longer games, sometimes it can come in. Confused hits throws. Actually, is one thing I was a little bit worried about. I was quite worried about playing on the meta deck.
Ooh.
And Too Confused doesn't really solve that problem, honestly, but it's like something to do. It also shuts off Harmon Comics, so that's very valuable.
Okay.
We got more petty. We got the second petty squabbles. This, yeah, great card. And it's another kind of way that Midnight can find extra resources. Where if you just pass the turn without committing her, then you can discard down to 0 cards, and then petty squabbles commit your character, draw 2, and hopefully you'll find the right block you're looking for at that point. And also, I mean, the commit a card after they use an ability on one of them is very, very good. It's useful on both offense and defense. You can tap down cards like Release from your opponent, or just like tap down a Brute Strength or Tide Lip from a Death aggro deck. Really good card. Giant Point Detention is a card. It's the last card in the sideboard here. It was kind of a last minute ad when I learned I was playing against Bromley, and I was concerned that again, this is kind of a peculiarities of the HLC system and something I hope never actually happens again. They will find out who our opponent is before we build our deck to snipe them, especially in a single elimination bracket at that point. But it's a hedge against any chicanery with the discard pile. It's useful against Eraserhead because you can shuffle its erases all the way. That's nice to do.
Did you have the read that they were playing Eraserhead?
I had no idea. I was completely surprised.
Okay, because it
And
does
then when
seem it does seem this is like such a Magic the Gathering kind of sideboard choice. Like if you knew you were playing Eraserhead, you're like, I'm gonna put exactly one giant bite, and if I just get it first, they're fucked.
no, like I knew I wanted. I knew I didn't want more than like 4 attacks is a lot of stuff, especially since I'm never like siding into like 23 attacks, right? I'm never gonna like cut foundations to play that many more attacks. I'm just gonna switch attacks, and so that's always kind of a marginal change. Where I might cut a foundation or an attack for some Dark Shadow. I might cut once in a blue moon cut another attack, or like cut a UA high, or I definitely went down to 2 some Dark Shadows once or twice in the tournament for like the release or for the shock treatment. Actually, that might have been the plan against Recovery Girl was -1 some Dark Shadow, +1 release, or +1 shock treatment rather. But on Giant Bite, I really want there to be more of this card in my deck. I really wanted to have 2. I really wanted to get it main. I just couldn't convince myself that it was better than anything in my main deck. Because the other trick this gets to do is you play. Not only is it like a proactive card against like a Recovery Girl, against an Eraserhead, but if they have resources in their discard pile you want to disrupt. Also, you can use it where you get close to the point where you're going to deck yourself. Then you Giant Point Detention, shuffle in triple 1.3 million volts, for instance, or triple Home Run Comet into your deck. And you enhance with Midnight, discard your whole hand and draw your whole deck. And boom, look, there's 3 of those nice attacks I just put in here. So that's kind of the dream of this card. It's a super concentrated burst of just raw damage output in a super long game, where I'm going to have the time to sculpt. I'm going to have time to get to the bottom of my deck. I'm going to need a handful of attacks to close the game out. That's what this was really aiming for. And then also, the combo ability can come up. We've got a lot of eye attacks, even though some Dark Shadow often gets in the way of that combo. And it's a pretty cool combo. It's very, very fast. It's got stun. It's got decent damage at that point. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This card has like a really fun technical enhance that I think real deck builders, brewers like can kind of like focus on and extrapolate. But most of the time, it's just a fucking 6/7 stun one.
Yeah,
I forget
heard
this card has stun one on it so often.
Dude, I know Andrew was talking a little bit about Andrew Holder was talking a little bit about how well positioned order is because making a stand is great. It destroys your opponent's momentum, and then drowning in resentment is great because there's so many people that are touching the discard pile. And he said that this is like the night before Swiss, I think, the night before day one. It might have been Saturday night. I don't know. No, it must have been Friday night. When we were like, we ended up playing Jabba the Hutt Love Letter. It was quite fun.
Star Wars Love Letter, yeah.
And you were there.
Yeah, you won at that, by the way. You just won everything this weekend.
I'm super like. I remember I played Liar's Dice with a bunch of folks in Orlando, and I was like weirdly blessed at that game. I don't know. It's the side event savant too, I guess.
You can't win both, Kevin. You got to leave the side events for the scrubs. Come on.
He said those two cards. I'm like, wow, those are both really good against Command Pigeon Flock. That sucks. I hope no one does that to me. And then also, Giant Point Detention plays great with those cards because they both give damage bonuses to stun attacks. And here's a super fast stun attack. You can play Throw in Your String and make them fat. Yeah, like just have one of each of those can be a 6/high for 10 all of a sudden. That's pretty nice.
Yeah,
so someone work on that.
It was really call Pippa up. Pippa can make it work. I was really happy to see effects like this being used because we saw Hardened Steel in the all symbol Eraserhead deck just kind of like stack a massive kill turn in game one where like 40 minutes in, Andrew's at like 10 or 15 health. And Corey just draws the rest of his deck, cycles, and then goes, I have 6 attacks. He just shows him.
Tim Keefe has been giving me shit because I keep nerding out about that game plan.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Oh my god. I'm thrilled. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think he only had 1 or 2 as well. Like, he definitely had more than 1 Hardened Steel. It was like the attack low block for that deck. Like all the other blocks are mids and high, and it was just really nice to see it come to fruition. And it's gonna happen with a deck like Fourth Kind more than any other, where you can really like kind of cinch your pants up and like ground yourself and block everything. And Andrew's list was like no throws. It was like no tape swing. It was like I'm actually just trying to kill you, not be fooling around with the cute stuff. So it just was a really, really good matchup for that kind of a thing. So seeing the Giant Bite Detention come out would have been so hype if you're like, well, I have 2 cards left in my deck. Let me just shuffle up my new hand for me.
Yeah, fortunately, both my one match where that kind of gameplay was going to come up was off stream, and also I had some Hambilism to kind of trivialize it anyway against Recovery Girl.
Yeah, let's talk. I guess let's talk Midnight a little bit more. I do want to get to the Eraserhead deck as well because I think while we have the opportunity of this 2-day format where you get to play 2 decks, I think that there is plenty to talk about from day 1, even though we're focused on day 2 a lot. But I do want to ask, what was your hardest matchup playing Midnight for this weekend?
So certainly the deck that actually made me go to 3 games was Jero.
Okay.
I actually 2-0'd everyone else I played, with the exception of a game loss for not de-sideboarding after the lunch break.
Which was when that happened. By the way, I don't know if you know, Tam Cardwell was live streaming at the event, and he's on stream. You can maybe find the clip where someone walks up and tells us, and we're all just like, "That's the most Kevin Broberg shit of all time." And Tamron Cardwell's like, "That's my goat." That's my goat right there. Well, that was the moment we knew you were going to win the entire tournament, is when you got a game loss against Recovery Girl. And we were like, oh shit, he gets to sideboard and go first? Fuck yeah. He just gets to start with, that was the strategic, I'm just going to have somnambulism game one.
I had to 2-0 him. I know Cody told me afterward he missed a new training method trigger that could have picked up a cheerleader that would have flashed by Somnom, or maybe work a lot harder to ever be able to steal his character, or commit his character. And so had he not done that, it was, the kills were pretty comfortable because I managed to he kind of slipped into a spot where getting his character committed would suck him in deadlock, and I was able to piece together the big turn kind of right on time.
Interesting. Yeah, Recovery Girl typically incredibly good at getting out of deadlock with Destroy 2 Foundations on face, but yeah, you can't miss a cheerleader trigger.
Yeah, the 77 card variance meant he didn't get any self-sacrifices, and I like to think that I played it reasonably well of attacking him in ways where he would have to make difficult choices if he wanted to not block it or whatever. I would be getting enough out of it if he chose to just take it and build something. But yeah, Somnoms came up at all the right times.
Yeah, and I think, attacks like Dark Shadow Ruin for really early game pressure work really well against Recovery Girl, because that's really not an attack you don't want to full block. And then, 1.3 million is just super, super good at closing out a game where you're willing to build 11, 12 foundations. So I have had relatively no issues when playing like Chaos Tokoyami. I've played against 2 different Recovery Girls with that deck and felt really fine with it. So I imagine having, both were 2-1s though. Both were like I won the dice roll. So I always imagined that if I had a 6-hander in my sideboard, if I couldn't get thrown to death on turn 3, like I'd have a much better matchup though. So you did mention being a little scared of throws. Like how was it like defending against that matchup? Like was your life total being threatened a lot?
I think it would have taken him more turns than I intended the game to take for him to finish me off with throws. I was a little nervous when he played like forceful blows, and if he got a couple momentum rolling behind those, that could have been threatening. But I certainly didn't worry about it too much, and I think I kind of looked like I didn't care about blocking enough that I think at one point I managed to kind of get a trick over on him by blocking, even though by getting him to think I didn't want to block, and so he didn't give it throw, which would have cost him a bunch of foundations. I just blocked, and then he didn't make any progress that way. I think I did confused off throw in one of the games they were all post sideboard games, effectively.
Hit him with that game 1 sideboard. If you don't get caught, it's fine. If you do get caught, it's fine.
I remember he said, like, I saw confusion in your Discord pile. I thought, wow, that's weird you have that main deck, but I wasn't going to say anything. Like, I also drew one, so I really couldn't ignore it. Like,
did you catch it and snitch on yourself, or like tell me about that?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. During my draw step of turn 3, I drew a confused, and it's like, this is incorrect. So judge.
Oh, good guy Kevin Broberg. See, that's real protagonist energy, bro. That's some real Deku energy. You got rewarded karmically for not just scumbagging. Yeah. That's the karmic victory. I mean, he wins. He's a good boy. He's a good fighter. He fights the right way. This is your champion we're talking about. Come on.
I mean, but just imagine how much of a shitstorm there'd be if he said something after the game to one of the judges, and the judges were like, "That doesn't sound right." They went and looked at my deck list and said, "You're retroactively disqualified, Broberg." Like
insane shitstorm. Insane it would be. It would be really shitty too, considering Confused is like targeted right at decks that gain keywords, and that's like her offensive game plan. And then, we talked somnambulism, like, so. Although I wouldn't assume that would be the card that got caught, but
Yeah, so I was equal part. Yeah, so I had failed to be sideboard after my match with Tim, which happened before the lunch break, which was like 2 hours prior, because of the long game that Cody had before the lunch break. And so I'd gone to lunch, and I came back and just like saw my deck was sitting on the table, saw my deck in the box sitting on the table. Like, yeah, we're ready to play. Let's go. It just didn't cross my mind that there was sideboarding to have been done. And so the confused were in. I did not bring Somnambulism into the Midnight Mirror against him, but I did have confused for his homework comments. So.
Right. Well, I mean, it all worked out in the end. So, like we said, you got the karma points. You snitched on yourself. You upheld the integrity of results even after IDing in the final round of Swiss. Man, I love this deck. I think it's super cool. I think it's got pretty much all the bases covered. You know, even with like a one of cheerful uppercut. I'm super excited to see the UA high, petty squabbles. You know, all the usual suspects are here. Award the Victor is now the high block that we get to play now that there's not enough high blocks on Chaos.
Yeah, there's not enough high blocks. They all have bad mods. And also, Award the Victor does something very important, which was kind of hedge against So Manly or against Cheerful Uppercut from opponent decks. You know, I really don't like having extra progressive difficulty on top of all my 5 diffs on top of my commitment costs on my character. And so ATV is really there. So it's something I very much look for if I'm playing a long game. If I'm going to have a big staging area, this is like a huge force multiplier. This is worth like, you know, it's worth a lot of foundations in your stage when you get to clear an attack that just dealt damage.
Yeah, in my head as Tokoyami, because that's just the Chaos deck I've played the most and worked on.
Yeah.
It fits the role of like what Crow and Frog did. Where like Crow and Frog was like, I have a safe, easy poke that doesn't count towards progressive. No one wants to block like the first Tokoyami attack a lot of the times. And having an Award the Victor causes people to make bad decisions around that because, you know, if you remove it from the card pool, we get a lot of the same extension that we get from Crow and Frog. So I'm really happy to see people play this card too.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this card. It's my absolute favorite in all symbol decks with Hard Barrage. And I just got really excited because you can play it with Kurogiri and Hardened Barrage, and you check your Hardened Barrage, you play it with Kuri's form again, and just tag them and tag them and tag them.
We're just loops. We're doing the loops.
Get the circus music. It's like you're like we're basically building our own Mino 1 at that point, but I'm excited about it anyway.
Okay, well, I also have to go back and edit like all of my deck profiles because the whole time I've been telling people they're running the wrong number of basic training if they're only running 3 instead of 4, and I guess the world champ difference has got 3, so I have to go edit that part out for all my deck profiles.
You know, it's fine. I think this game is too hard to be absolutely precisely correct about everything all the time, and so it's fine to have shortcuts and heuristics like just play 4 of this card. It's really good. That's my logic with struggling studies. I see decks that have 3 struggling studies, and I'm insulted because that card is busted. Just play 4 of that card. It's too good. But I understand why you don't. I understand why people don't want to. Although I don't really understand because are you not afraid of? Do you like not respect stupid seasonal advantage or something? You want your Earth opponent to have their way with your staging area? You gotta protect yourself with study. Come on.
I'm more than halfway done in almost all of the Earth decks, like all the 6-hand size decks on seizing symbols are not running it. Like, it's like half and half. Some have it sideboard and some don't. And a bunch of them don't have it at all. Like, it is blowing my mind. There's plenty of Ojiro players who don't want to run even a single copy of it. So.
Well, if you're a Galaxy brand and like predicted that the meta would be, you know, that your side of the bracket would be half Giro, I understand not really wanting it in that matchup, at least.
Yeah. Like if you're expecting everyone to just flip Chivalrous anyways, you're like, I don't need the +2 speed that bad.
True, yeah, and if you because like the Earth metagame certainly got a little bit inbred where and so everyone was playing Chivalrous, and so like +2 speed and flip their Chivalrous isn't that good. Except against Midnight, it's pretty good actually because Chivalrous is insane at Midnight.
So yeah, I don't know, man. It's really wild. The this whole format is super unique, and I think it's safe to say we're never gonna see anything exactly like this ever again. For better or for worse. Yeah,
and certainly, there's a lot of things that I hope we never see quite like this again from this format. I think not for nothing, like the fact that no one but us cared about it, right? There's no other event hardly at all. Between the bans and set 4 is just something anyway.
Very, very interesting, but let's transition a bit. Let's talk day 1. Let's talk about Swiss because you ended up undefeated, right? You were the 2nd seed. You got to basically go first the entire tournament because Barrett Bryant got eliminated in the very first round. So you were locked in to never go second. Talk to me about Eraserhead. Talk to me about getting that illustrious second seed spot. And we've got what, Void? Yeah, Void Eraserhead.
Yeah, so this was originally this deck was first called Boomer Kicks, because Levi is really high on this all like Eraserhead 2 starter deck kind of weapons package. I really liked all simple decks in general, like All Might, Ojiro 2, splashing into Eraserhead, with like the punch packages and stuff.
Mm.
But they just didn't quite feel good enough. And I know Tim had been working on some deck lists built around Total Eraser Binding, the powerful 3 attack out of Eraser's starter deck, and they just didn't quite feel like they were all there to me. Like we would say, we're going to use Prone to Dry Eyes, we're going to do a bunch of damage, and we're going to like Goldfish people or whatever. It just didn't quite come together. It didn't feel like it was good enough. But I said, well, Recipro Extend plus Prone to Dry Eyes seems pretty good together. That seems like a nice pairing. And then I said, well, you know what else is pretty good with Prone to Dry Eyes is clearing your card pool of all the other kicks you've played with Recipro Acceleration Kick.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I was way back in set 1 playing Coordinated Effort. It was great. And then the other thing that really got me going on this deck, actually there were 2 other things that got me going on this deck. One of them is another of my long-term love affairs, is Plus Ultra on Acceleration Kick or on Recipro Burst with floating bonuses. So Plus Ultra doubles your damage from whatever damage you happen to already be at, or doubles your speed for that matter as well. But doubles your damage. And so if you have Dry Eyes on +3 and you play an Acceleration Kick, it's 18 damage. If you have a Extend, like you go Extend, Jab, Acceleration Kick, that's 21 damage. That's 20 damage +1 from the 3rd Dry Eyes enhance you do later. That's kind of gas. That's kind of enormous. And that combined, so like I kind of had a 2-way threat. I had the big string with Dry Eyes and all these cantrip attacks, Jab, Binding Kick, Extend. And then I also had the big dunk with Plus Ultra providing a ton of extra damage, especially with the Extend buff. If I can double the Extend buff, I both get a ton of speed from Extend plus Eraserhead plus whatever else. And then I have the Plus Ultra to provide plenty enough damage. And so really, Plus Ultra is one of the big pieces of spice, and also just like Plus Ultra plus Tape, lets you actually defend against Midnight, lets you defend against a whatever other Friend of Animal decks you have out there, whatever other Cannon Blast you have out of Momo. 10 speed attacks, but Tape plus Plus Ultra still cleanly beats them. That's defending against Ojiro sometimes. And also Eraserhead's amazing into Ojiro. That was really, maybe that was probably the number one thing, was we said, well, what's an Eraserhead deck that's actually, like, what's the best Eraserhead deck? Because we want to beat up Ojiro, so let's build this deck. And the other trick I really liked, I really kind of fell in love with, was just Adorable Telepath plus Manly Passionate Guy.
Okay.
And that is infinite high blocks. That says -2 speed, pick up the Telepath, -1 speed, block, put it back in my stage. I have no card pool. You have done the pond is still. There's not a wave on the surface of this pond. Your cake your high attack just got absorbed harmlessly. All you just flip a Manly Passionate Guy. And that's sweet. That's exciting. And so I worked on this deck a little bit. I actually brought this with me to Somerville for Jacob Mansur's charity tournament. Awesome. He did a standard tournament into it's scheduled for a standard 1K. Didn't get enough entrance for it to be 1K, but cash tournament followed by a standard MHA only tournament to benefit a local animal shelter. And I brought this to play in that, and kind of had formulated in my head that I would play Eraserhead on day 1 to bully any Ojiros out of the tournament, hopefully, and to hopefully get people thinking about beating Eraserhead so that I can then hit them sideways with Midnight. And I really, in that tournament, number one, I managed to take a match off of a Earth deck with Sato 1, who's kind of the king of the stun aggression game, right? Like Hiroshima was the less aggressive version of that, and yes. Playing one with nature, but still playing one with nature, still playing all the snack times, all that stuff.
Hiroshima gets to like ready 2 of his foundation. Sato got to stun 2 of yours, right? Like that was
Exactly, yeah. And
the big
so
difference.
this deck was good enough to stand up to that, and then also it was like competitive. It was finally thanks to the quad dry eyes and all of the ways to put extra cards in our hand and the relatively small deck size. I'm only playing, I think, 50 something, like
It
63
is,
cards.
yeah.
And so, a lot of racer decks are playing 80 cards and aren't even playing 4 dry eyes. They're not, and so they're playing, maybe they're playing Reciprocal Extend, but they're effectively playing 3 copies out of 60 rather than, so 1 out of 20 cards is a Reciprocal Extend instead of 1 out of 15 or even fewer if my deck were a little bit tighter. And so I could actually fight 6-hand size decks. I could actually fight All Might, and if I was player 1 or if the draws came together right, I could actually win the game against All Might, where that's typically been a very rough matchup for Racer. He must have a lot of cards in his hand, and All Might has a very long, persistent string of off-zone attacks kind of offense that gives him headaches. But I could actually count to 30 through some blocks with this deck, thanks to the power of this attack lineup, and thanks to the power of I think what I'm doing differently is I'm playing a meaner deck. I'm playing a deck that can actually fight people a little bit better. With the 4 dry eyes, I'm pretty reliable at getting those out on turns 1 and 2. And then this attack lineup with a nut draw, I basically turn into Asui, right? I can play kick that draws a card into acceleration, clears my card pool, into kick that draws a card into acceleration kick number 2 that clears my card pool, into jab, game over. Jab in a lot of decks kind of sucks. It's a 3-speed mid, but Eraser makes it a 5-speed mid. And you're actually testing some of my other kicks that are going to be 6-speed minimum off zones, or maybe I know I had a game against Keenan where he blocked an acceleration kick and committed his entire stage, and it's like, well, I got this jab that's going to be unblockable now. And this jab that's going to be unblockable is going to put a card in my hand to pay for dry eyes. So now it's going to be like an 8 damage hardened jab. The synergy, I guess it's a whole bunch package, and I hadn't even got to the point that I was trying to get to when I started talking about Plus Ultra 20 minutes ago, which is just that we're playing 4X Small and Nimber together with All Worked Up and Acrobatic, which originally there was more acrobatics in this deck, but it's a mid block, and we have a million mid blocks because we're Eraserhead, so it got one of its slots cut to make try to get down to a trimmer size. I think in an ideal world, I'd only be playing 50 cards or 50-ish cards, but we're still at 60 something because I don't want to deck myself. So there's an angle there, but Small and Nimber is freaking sweet. This is a foundation that counts for 2 control checks, potentially 3 control checks over the turn cycle if you ready it on your turn and then also your opponent's turn.
Okay.
And it provides a little teeny bit of extra damage. Most of our attacks are charges and or furies. Hardened Jab, I think, is the main one that Hardened Jab and Grasping Tape Toss are the ones that don't get the buffs. Actually, just buff kicks? Yeah, buff kicks, yeah. So Binding Kick can wear this. It's actually surprisingly good just to play a Binding Kick and then do a Small Nimber buff on it and then pick up Adorable Telepath, ready your Small Nimber, give it another speed, and now you've built your own 8-speed attack for a 5 damage that's going to draw a card if it hits. And if it hits, well, you draw a card. And you just say, cool, I'm going to chill. I'm going to build out, and I'm going to have momentum for my Reciprocal Burst, for my Plus Ultra later, for the EX on my Hardened Uppercut. And that line feels great. And this deck is playing very few 2-diffs, and it's got 4 Dry Eyes as our kind of higher difficulty foundation, and also Stun Hate. Small and Nimber also effectively Stun Hate. All worked out kind of like Stun Hate, because you play well committed. Mm-hmm. But then we're just playing a ton of spams. The spams are all so incredibly good. Manly Passion Guy and Tape are both insane defensive resources, calling for backup. I really wanted this deck to just play 0-diff that just turns itself face down, just so I could reliably have 2 face downs to ready with Dry Eyes. I could reliably have 2 face downs to blow up with Hardened Uppercut. I could reliably, have a card to pick up with Hardened Jab, just to then potentially be able to discard it to Dry Eyes. That I actually had a play come up against Richard on day 1, who was playing Tokoyami, where I played a jab, I flipped a Tape for no effect, changed the stack to mid zone. It was already mid, and I just picked up that Tape to then discard it Dry Eyes, and that actually won that. So I guess to give a quick tournament report of what I actually played against on day 1. First round I faced against Mike Hardiman's Good Symbol Momo deck, and
the only Momo that showed up.
Yeah, and we had an intense match. I really only won game one because of my two main deck plus ultras that I drew at the same time.
Oh,
He
come on!
played
Don't
a
tell me that.
triple cannon blast into back alley haymaker turn, and I had to take one of those cannon blasts on the chin. I taped plus ultra one. I blocked another one on an 11 and checked a 3. And then thanks to Dry Eyes, he wasn't able to stun me on the last one, or on that haymaker rather. And then I was able to plus ultra, check a 3, and tap out to pass that.
Wild.
Um, so that was awesome. And then I managed to hold on in an insane squeaker of game 2 where I ultimately ran a double acceleration kick into his study group leader.
Ooh.
And so it lost EX, but then I still plus altered it for damage, which put it to, I think, 20. Does that sound right?
That's so funny.
No,
if it came in with an extend bonus?
No, so it had Dry Eyes times 2.
Ooh,
No, it was at 16. It was at 16. So it was double Dry Eyes, plus ultra to 16 damage.
Goodness.
But he had triple quick create self-sacrifice, and he was at 11.
I just realized how good Prone to Dry Eyes is with plus ultra, actually.
Yes, it's super good.
Wild.
And so it was only 4 speed, so it was within range to be blockable. But he uses Prepare for Battle to fish for a low block. I assume he's found it, so I combo and have him discard a card. He apparently draws the low block off of that, but it's a +3 low, and then he checks a 3 on his block and fails. And so that's how I squeaked out of round 1.
Wild. Hey man, better lucky than good sometimes.
Yeah. You gotta be good to get to the point where you can get lucky, I think is the
exactly.
A lot of things had to come together, and we had to have the eraser deck that can actually fight people to get to that point. Round 2, I guess, not to belabor the entire podcast of this story, but I fought against Tim Keefe, who was playing the all Ojiro deck we've been working on. So
the deck is
unfortunate matchup for him.
The all Ojiro is a sweet deck.
Yeah, it's a close cousin to the Earth Ojiro. Like, just all the cards are so good, it doesn't even matter that you're playing it on a different symbol. Like, in my head, it's like we get Spooky as this crazy defensive resource, and you get Destined for Mainstream Success, and that's all you need to be playing the all symbol. That's because you're still playing all of Ojiro's cards. You're still playing Karate Chop. You're still playing Ketchup and Mustard. You're still playing Snack Time, which is better than One with Nature.
Oh man, it's so funny. I view the all symbol right now, especially if you're gonna go punch lineup. It's like you can't decide between playing Earth or Good, so you just play the all symbol, which has like the mix of the best of both worlds. And it's super funny to me. There's so many nicknames for the high-low punches, the rapid speed punch. Like, I'm a big fan of Bert and Ernie punch, but Ketchup and Mustard always makes me laugh too.
Yeah. So we played a close, but not that close. Like a game one that was close to being close, I think. But I managed to finish him off. I think actually, in relatively large part, I found my 1x Think Fast, which is really a card I put in my deck so that I can harden jab against players like Tim Keefe. I really, it sucks playing people who just like actually know your deck and are going to wisely play on your block zones. And then Tim Keefe is very much that player where he can defend well enough with a character like Ojiro, even this very aggressive deck. But Think Fast really made it so that his 6 hand size and his wanting to sculpt and stuff really could not keep up with the random pokes I would send, and then I could make my pokes high one turn and load the next turn, and just make life really hard for him. Then he switched to all Eraser Head, and we had the Eraser Mirror is a wild thing. I encourage anyone to play it. Because you're both trying to get enough foundations in place so you can actually play an attack string that'll get the job done. But then also, to actually pass a block, you either have to cancel out their erase +2, but you can also erase their character to turn a card in your hand into -2 speed. And so they can do that back to you, and they can even erase you to keep you from getting a mid block if they think you're sleeping on mid blocks. And it's a very, very interesting, very dynamic play. 7 anti aggro mirrors are a wild thing. But I managed to take that one down, and then got paired into I sure don't remember Richard's last name, but one of the Brits playing a Chaos Tokiyami deck that looked really good.
Richard
And
Plummer,
kind
I
of
believe.
Plumber, yeah.
That makes the most sense to me.
And yeah, I think the spirit of this deck being a Eraserhead deck with some muscle, with some damage output, really came through there. Where we played a longish game one, then he bodied me. We played a short-ish, but not that short game two, where he beat me. And there were about 3 minutes on the clock. We shuffled up really fast and played 3 turns, which finished with, this is where the Hardened Jab pick up a tape play came in, and then a Binding Cloth capture and a timely 5 check on a Hardened Uppercut managed to let me seal that game, seal the match in only 3 minutes of clock time.
When your opponent's like, well, I guess we could try. You can try to kill me. They never expect you to actually kill them. You're like shuffling and you're just like, hey, man, yeah, sure, go for it.
When we shuffled up fast, we were playing quickly. We were both trying to get a result on the board. And fortunately, my checks came up well enough. I don't think it was quite as insane as my checks in the finals of the running fives. But I definitely hit a 5 on the end to get lethal with Hardened Uppercut. And then around 4, I got paired into Keen Meadows playing Earth Ojiro, and honestly, this whole weekend was really just like my day. There was a point where he played a Texas Smash, and I played my last cards in my hand to respond to the race and then block it, and then draw 2 with Eraserhead, tapped out completely. And he plays, maybe it wasn't Texas Smash, and then I think he played Texas Smash second. And I had drawn a race in my 2 cards. So I got to, effectively take 3 damage off the table because he doesn't get to Ojiro. He doesn't get to Ojiro to pick up an attack. And also he has 1 more progressive difficulty. And if I hadn't had the second erase for that turn, and he had checked a pair of 5s after that, he'd get Texas for +4 damage. They get 3 more damage. I was at 15, and I think, so Texas is virtually 11, and then 4 more from anything. He'd have had to check a 5 and commit his character to play the rapid punches afterward, but it would have been lethal damage had I not top decked that erase. So I got on game 1 like that, and then
that's so gnarly.
Game 2, we had a grossly asymmetrical early build where he got a 3 build on 1 as player 1, and then I got a big build and some good defense, and kind of ran away with it, and then also pretty effectively beat him to death. Once that time came, thanks to I think I got a dry eyes up to 3 or 4 in that game, and played a big attack string, and then 4-0 and was able to intentionally draw with Barrett, who got Swiss Champ and Swiss Champ Cursed. So really,
passed that on to him. I saw that sneaky maneuver.
Every possible thing came up my way. I mean, got the karma, got the mojo of the room lined up, the feng shui of the room lined up, so that Bear would get smitten, and I would be able to avoid that.
So I got a question from the chat here, and I guess it's probably a question that's on a lot of people's minds because you said you went undefeated. Why did you not choose this deck for day 2? Was there really specific matchups, or just what was the influence to pick Midnight over this deck?
So, I think the first reason on my mind was simply that I didn't want to be predictable. I didn't want to play the same deck twice and play a deck that kind of, in the folk wisdom, and I don't know if it's 100% true, I don't want to play a deck that gets owned by Jiro and have someone just show up with Jiro and beat me.
Well, you did avoid getting owned by Jiro in day 2, so that definitely worked out.
And especially, once I knew that Tim Keefe was in my bracket, the plan had always been I was going to be Eraser day 1 and Midnight day 2, and I didn't see anything to make me want to change that plan. And the motivation for that plan was that I thought the things that would beat up Eraserhead, the kind of approach you would use to fight Eraserhead, would not work very well against Midnight. And I thought that was kind of that intuition was really the foundation of that strategy.
Gotcha.
I remember I talked to Keenan after our match, and I said, I'm really, I had a plan of what I was going to do. Really kind of torn because I'm doing so well with the Racer deck day 1. If I play Midnight day 2 and I lose to Ojiro or something, I would feel like the biggest moron in the world after beating it so convincingly on day one with my day one deck. But yeah, then I saw my first match was going to be Bromley. I didn't want to try to play this kind of medium strength offense deck into potentially a Bromley control deck. I guess the Eraser Mirror would have been pretty sweet.
But then also, we just talked about how cool it is, and these would have been two wildly different Eraserhead decks.
Yeah, I think he probably would have been a favorite in there because I think I don't know. I guess I can erase his bracers if that ever comes up. I can just use the enhance to seal that.
You did do that to anyways with Midnight, and that did absolutely save your life with the sequencing that he had to go through was just really tough because there's no realistic way he was going to stop you from getting that seal off.
Yeah, I feel like I had a lot of fortunate draws and I was in situations where I was playing, like I have 2 Irrefutable Force of Nature in my deck, and I find them at the right times. I have 2 Electric Jolt, and I find them at the right time. So I certainly felt blessed on day 2. It was just my weekend, I guess. But
it certainly was.
Yeah, so
it certainly was your weekend.
Hey, somebody's got to win.
That's true. Yeah, the only other thing that that kind of sticks out to me is you're a big fan of Binding Kick, and I'm also looking at the block situation. We only have 11 low blocks, so having 3 of this makes a lot of sense. But I think either this slot or like the Tape Toss slot for a lot of Eraserhead decks is the Rebound Kick slot, which you talked about being mid block centric, right? Like having tons of mid blocks already and having them on demand. Is that the main reason? Like what matchups is Rebound Sidekick in the sideboard for instead of the main board?
So I think Rebound Sidekick it's really filling the same kind of role as Grasping Tape Toss, where it's just an attack that I can play and it's going to be pretty reliable momentum. But I grew to hate Rebound Sidekick in this deck because there was a game where I had like 3 attacks, and if they all got to wear Prone to Dry Eyes bonuses, I would have been able to win the game. And Rebound Sidekick wears buffs from previous attacks, but it does not get an enhanced step to give it more buffs. And so I was not able to finish that game out because my Rebound Sidekick was only going to be 5 damage instead of 6. And that was infuriating. And, Tape Toss also does some other, has Deadlock. I think it's certainly quite valuable. This deck is not heavy on Deadlock abilities. And having especially a very powerful one that comes as a surprise from your hand is worth, has a lot of ephemeral value. There's a better word for this I'm looking for, but the surprise is worth a lot, I think.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure when I had plans to have one or the other, and sometimes I want to have more of both. If I really, if my opponents attack my momentum a lot, or is like really good at defending high zones, and I know that they won't ever not be holding high blocks or something, I might take up Binding Kicks for more reliable Rebound Sidekicks. And if I want to do, if I want to potentially save 2 life from the momentum, if I just want a cheaper attack, if I played against Jiro, for instance, I'd probably bring in Rebound Sidekick just because it's cheaper, and if I'm getting that momentum anyway, Grasping Tape Toss, I don't need to overpay for 5 difficulty to just be able to get that first momentum going.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, really, the first and foremost reason was just I wanted more enhanced steps when it came up, and certainly, I think Eraserhead's Grasping Tape Tosses are very good if you have an actual attack turn lined up behind them. Stun 1 plus a 4-speed attack that's gonna target commit 1 if they don't block it. It's really annoying, and you're not buying very much by defending this, but you kind of have to. But if you do, you kind of can't win, right? If you block this and then you have to block a hardened jab and overcommit to block that, and then there's more stuff coming behind that, you're just gonna be buried real fast.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in love with how big Acceleration Kick can get with this, but for that to happen, that requires full. What?
I do like that play, yeah, where you get to put the Rebound Tech in your pool for 2 damage, and then pay EX with it, and get the 2 speed, and then not have to worry about the card pool clog.
Right.
But I think it's an easy trap to say, wow, these cards work together so well. There's so much synergy here. But really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not you're not getting a strength added on strength. You're just getting to mitigate the weakness of a weak card.
Right. And so the thing I was gonna,
And so
yeah,
it's,
the thing for me is I've noticed it it adds to the problem that Eraserhead already has. Eraserhead's already down to poke at you and get momentum and then kill you way later. And rebound sidekick just kind of reinforces that. Even if people block it, that doesn't typically like increase the turn count, right? Like just because it goes to momentum, well, you lost the 4 damage that was gonna deal. You lost the 3 damage that's guaranteed from a tape toss. If we're gonna compare those two slots, so I have fallen out of love with it, but it seemed like a snap inclusion. The getting to use two of these on acceleration kick could turn like a really schmedium hand into a really good looking one, but at the same time, like this looks like an Eraserhead list that can kill you from 100 to 0 with no momentum by just stringing together quality attacks with a copy of Prone to Dry Eyes out. And I assume that was a big part of the game plan, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like even the foundations, adorable telepath and calling for backup actually play very important roles in this deck of just giving you more gas for front of dry eyes. I certainly am aiming to this deck to get, if I can get 2 front of dry eyes my stage, that's great because that means my opening reciprocal extend is going to be for 6 damage. My opening binding key is going to be for 6 damage, and then I'm going to keep ramping those up really fast to make all of my attacks into serious threats.
Yeah, definitely big fan of this. I might have to try this version out just because Eraserhead seems like my kind of thing, but I just get killed by partial blocking. That seems to be almost like every Eraserhead deck is just able to block everything. It's just whether or not you're still taking damage a lot of the times. And yeah, maybe Adorable Telepath is just gonna shore up those percentages when I have access to picking up mids and high blocks. Yeah, very very cool. Anything very specific from the sideboard that you want to talk about? It's mostly a lot of just like the extra copies of our really powerful tech pieces. We do have a Nullify. Did this do anything for you on day
Uh,
one?
no, no, I,
Yeah,
I don't know if I brought it in actually. I think I brought it in.
it's
I should
such
have
a
brought.
cool
I probably
card.
brought it in against Tokoyami, but it seems good. It seems like a good surprise. I don't really have a good grasp on when precisely I want it,
Hmm.
and when precisely it's actually worth having. It does stain your card pool. It does cost card pull a card in your hand. It's hard to get that 2-1. If I could get 2 momentum reliably to cancel a character ability, I'd totally want this for Ojiro. Or it's probably not even true because I'd rather just erase him than spend a card on nullifying something.
Right.
But maybe like a Momo once per. No, still not even that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me that it's got the two Eraserhead symbols, Eraserhead 1, for obvious reasons. And, I get thematically why it's here, but I just kind of think it's always seems to be a little bit of a waste because I don't know, some of the most popular decks on those symbols are just Eraserhead 1. And, the bottom part for 2 momentum, like you just erase people, even in the Eraserhead that this card is like for, like Eraserhead 2, he can still just play erase and it leaves the card pool.
yeah,
And you lock out all abilities during that attack. So it's a really interesting card that I'd like to see more of, but they played it very safe with the first hand trap cancel, which makes sense.
which yeah, I'm happy. Like if I played against like Staff Strike Jiro, this would be an easy include because I can cancel Staff Strike's ability, and that's great.
True.
Um, I've got and yeah, I think on the sideboard, I've got the 4th copies each of Manufacturing Guy and Erase. I think they come in when you want to block long strings a lot, or block relatively slow high attacks a lot. And when you actually want to use Erases Enhanced to steal things, you want to have more copies in your deck, so you can make sure to always have the card available to pick up with Eraser's Heads Enhance. We've got the 2nd copies of Night Watch and Petty Squabble. Petty Squabble is a really interesting card in this deck, just because you are often. I think the big struggle Eraserhead has, especially the more traditional builds, I guess, is that if
Mm,
your offense isn't really coming together and you have to defend, when they attack you, you often have to discard attacks to pick up erases, or you have to kind of carefully manage your hand size, and it's very difficult to sculpt a kill turn together while also defending yourself, while also not getting killed. And so Petty Squabbles doesn't help with that at all, really in any way. But it gives you an extra ability to discard cards to tap down their board. And, Adorable Telepath can certainly come in to pay for that. Adorable Telepath can certainly come in to just let you block something without blocking with an attack after you give it -2 speed with a raise or after you use a raise's response. And yeah, I think I actually ended up doing the one main, one side squabbles in both my decks this weekend. It's just a super powerful effect in the right situations where, if your opponent has a big stage with a couple of critical pieces, getting to punch one of them out is just really great. And then also it does play on offense very well too, where you can tap down a release or a card like Rescue Completed is effective. It's not, I think it's not a huge trump, but it's useful to have. It's a powerful effect, to be sure. And then we have more jabs and more hardened uppercuts for when either I think jab is really there if I'm playing against a seasonally advantaged kind of deck. Someone who's trying to play a slower grindy control game, or just like a 5-hand size character. I just want to have more attacks that are kind of safe and net resources. But yeah, certainly picking up Prone to Dry Eyes if they've flipped, or picking up a tape or calling for backup, while also readying our small members, while also potentially getting an extra resource to throw away to Prone to Dry Eyes is very, very, very good card. Certainly, probably could be 4-main deck with a straight face. But it'd be either moving away from kicks or cutting some of the other funny tech slots. And then Hardened Uppercut is really great. It's like another beefy attack in this deck. The EX2 certainly can come into play. And it's being 9 base damage with, starting at 5 speed from Eraserhead. Its ability can ready small member in a pinch if you don't have another out for that.
It functions a lot like an early game Recipro Burst a lot of the times in games I play.
I love Recipro Burst. I've really not been terribly impressed with it in this deck. It's been a lot of stun one. It's like just stun one where the buffs from Recipro extend kind of doesn't matter. It's hard to get. I don't think I've ever had like 3 momentum with this deck to spend. And even just like Recipro extend into burst with 1 momentum is pretty good. It's like 8 speed low for 10 or something, 10, 12. Yeah, low 12, I think. Because it's get 2 speed from extend, 2 speed from Racer, 1 from itself, so it's +5. And then it's +5 damage. And 2 damage from so 8 low 12. 8 low 12 is like not bad, but it's not life changing or anything.
Yeah. Burst is one of the few attacks that still gets played, I think, that is just completely unimpressive by itself. Almost every attack that gets played can do something on its own, At least ever since...
My kingdom for a command pigeon flock into friend with animals that can play with Recipro Burst. That'd be so hot.
Oh, that'd be so much. Just void symbol command pigeon flock. That'd be kind of gnarly.
I didn't know how much I needed that until, I kind of juxtaposed Midnight and Eraserhead.
Well, I guess, so you could play like a life plus Recipro Burst symbol deck. And you can play Standard, and you can go Command Pigeon Flock, build in Friend of Animals, and then Swordfish the Command Pigeon Flock, and then play Recipro Burst. Pretty nice. Just completely sack away your one attack for... I don't know. It'll be a while before we get a multi-IP set tournament, I think.
Yeah, probably.
So... I want to ask you, what was your favorite matchup of the entire weekend? We talked about your hardest matchup for day 2 a little bit, and just kind of the road bumps there. But and this can include it. I don't think you got a chance to play in too many side events, but for any game you played, for any match you played, what was your favorite match of the weekend?
That's a tough question.
It is, especially since you had a week.
So I really loved my match with Tim Keefe. The Midnight Mirror was really sweet. It was just so much like threat and response, and so much really, really interesting calculation, and so much like UA high just like floating above the battlefield, threatening to explode at all times. And I was on the receiving end of that, so it was really great for me. And it was just a really cool game. I know I've told the story where like we spent 5 turns. Like, we would draw our hands, calculate for 2 minutes, play an attack, push some buttons, they would push some buttons, I would push some buttons, they would push some buttons. We would go to the block step, it would connect, and then we would build one pass. And so we both did this for like my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. Sorry, I think he did it last because on my turn I played at 1.3 million volts, and he pushed a lot of buttons, and then I still killed him. Like he enhance, remove my irrefutable force of nature, like seal your successful results, try to take away your foundation count or something to that level of desperation. And I really thought about like, well, I this is correct for you to have gone to these extremes. I kind of want to just like pass and just like keep going with your staging area depleted and come back again next turn. But no, I've got it here. I can just continue and finish the game.
UFS is God intended.
It really is. It really is. It's like both the mix of offense and defense. I think one of the most underrated things to do in the game, and I understand why people are reticent to do this, but I heard someone tell a story today about how they played against a Bakugo deck, and on turn 2, they like used triple electric shouldered hands and blocked twice, and then still died from full. And it's like, well, did you block the first 2 attacks or the last 2 attacks? The last, 2 of the last 3 attacks, and still died. Because you can just not block, and then they're not as happy, right? They don't get to clear their card pool. They have to have things happening. If you block the first attack, well, now you might be open. Now you have made the game simpler and easier to calculate for your opponent.
Right.
And if you don't block it, your life total goes down. But they have a card in their card pool. Now they have, they've expended their resources to try to make you not block. And now, if they pass the turn, they get their momentum. They feel good about that. They get to ready their staging area before they try to attack you again. And so you can just maintain the tension sometimes by just not blocking. And of course, you can also maintain the tension by just saying, I'm going to block all your stuff. Come at me, bro. You ain't got nothing. Which is my favorite thing to do at midnight, because you have so much life, you can actually pull that off.
Also, UFS is God intended. Block everything.
Oh, he's got the explosive release. That's truly deplorable. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
There's sometimes there's no good answers, right? Sometimes they put you in a 50-50 that you have to guess, but
that's IER doing its job to a T, right? It's causing that mental game that's causing that sort of poker game within the chess game that we play.
Yeah, Bakugo is such a nasty deck, actually. Like
it's one of the best designed characters they've ever done. Like, it's a crime it doesn't get played more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like not quite like brilliant enough to like just scrap with the Jiros of the world. I think is really the story. Like,
if it had like Precious Lesson, people would play it.
I think it's even just like, it's not even that he's underpowered for what he needs to be doing. It's just that he's in a kind of role that it doesn't align well with the metagame, right? I think if like if we were still in the Momo 1 world and she didn't have Face Shield to get to clown him, he would be able to really beat her up in like, a 4 or 5 turn game, and he just gets to bully her constantly, and she's just in a guessing game, he's like triggering Excited for Blood or whatever. You could build like a really good like fish deck that's gonna like play just enough control, just enough resource advantage stuff to just make a control deck miserable, but then it won't necessarily extend to an aggro deck because its raw numbers aren't all there. And I wonder if that's where Bakugo lives. Is that he's not like the raw numbers, just coin flip aggro deck against Tokoyami and against Jiro, but he's really there to punish people who are playing a different kind of game that's a little bit slower and a little bit less able to keep up with his. Like, he's very resilient if he's going to be beating you down with like stun grenades and stuff.
Yeah. He's on the cusp, I would say, because we're starting to get more draw power for the Fury lineup. And that's the other thing. He's locked to a single keyword, so you can probably say that Bakugo 1 is about as good as the Fury attack lineups on his symbols are ever going to be. But yeah, that's definitely a cool deck to watch in action, and there's so many different ways to build it.
Real Clash is Fury. Okay, that's fucked up.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of keywords on it, don't it? It has like
stun
infinity
grenade
symbol and infinity keywords.
Stun grenade into her Clash. I will have to think on this one. That's something.
Yeah.
It's been too long since I've sleeved up a stun grenade. I think the last time I played an Ochako deck and it was like losing to Ojiro very badly. So
Yeah. It's kind of a shame Heroic Strike doesn't just get a momentum with Nitro XR, and you'd have to do a lot of really weird shit to get that to work, but that was a pet project I had that never got out of the blocks. But we're getting off topic. I want to talk about you and your experience at the HLC really quick while we wrap things up. For the whole weekend, Jasco flew you guys out, took you on a party bus, right? We've heard about that. Had dinner at, well, I guess you missed dinner, right? Where'd you have dinner at?
I had dinner at the Caesar's Buffet, the Bacchanal.
Ooh, fancy boy.
No regrets, but kind of some regrets. I don't know. I think they're both very. I had like 10 I had like at least 10 plates of incredible food. They were like my table mates, the rest of the roster were making fun of me. Like they have a time limit. They're giving us a stink eye. We gotta leave. I'm like, no, let me get one more plate of dessert. This is really good. Um, Focus an amazing time. I'd have been happy to join you guys, but we had already made our plans too far in advance. We could cancel.
Right.
But I had a great time there. Yeah, I think I was certainly, I think, struggling under the weight of, trying not to get myself stressed out too much about Sunday. And I think I ultimately did a good job with that, but I think I didn't have much like juice in the tank to really, socialize with a lot of people very much, or to say hi to all my friends from all over the place. People came up and said hi to me, and I am grateful for that. I appreciate that and everything. I didn't necessarily go out to say hi to many other people, or certainly like anyone who I didn't know very well. I just kind of hi, right. I'm a stranger, whatever.
They also had, for the first time, I guess, really, they had the player interviews. How did you feel about that? I thought it was pretty cool.
I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was fun. I was kind of surprised it was the format was kind of like they gave you a prompt and then you just kind of repeated the prompt and then finished the sentence. I kind of anticipated more of an interview style, but when I saw them on screen where there's kind of, here's the competitor talking to the camera, like that looked familiar. That made sense. And I like those overall.
Yeah, for considering
I nailed my prediction. I was gonna cry. I said I was gonna cry, and I was right.
Yeah, that's true. I did think, you see, that you had the most humble answer to that. You called yourself out on the sideboard thing. I mean, that's just, you live right and you will be rewarded, folks. Whether or not you believe in cosmic entities or not, there is proof positive right there. So really happy about that one. I do think for the what they were using it for, right, the B-roll style thing, and where they were put, I think it was the right format. But I was with you. I thought they were gonna have someone asking interview questions and having a back and forth. And so seeing the final product, it made sense. But I was a little skeptical going into it.
Yeah, and I think it works well. I think I haven't made time yet to actually go back and watch the VOD. Maybe I'll do that on Saturday. Just here's my Saturday, just HLC marathon. I don't know, but
that's actually what I'm planning to do. I think is stream day one of Swiss on Saturday. So
all right,
do react to it, listen to my own commentary.
I don't know if you're gonna watch on 2x speed, but I'll be watching on 2x speed.
I usually do. Normally I do because I mute it anyways and I talk over it. I'm not sure if I'm going to or not because, normally when I've done commentary, I'm doing every round this time. The last couple events we've had the rotation. So I might not. I don't know. But I usually do watch on 2x speed and mute it. So, especially if it's matches I've already seen before and I'm just watching it with the chat, and trying to pause and do analysis. That's the other thing. I'm gonna pause and do, whenever I'm gonna talk over stuff that's happening and stuff like that. But that gets really heinous with our game because streamers reacting to stuff will do it with a 5-minute video and turn 10 minutes, 15 minutes of content. You do that with an hour-long game of UFS, it's you're 3 hours into your 2x speed game, right? You've turned 30 minutes into 3 hours. But yeah, man, I'm super happy for you. I'm glad you had a great time. Would you say Jessica gave you the rock star treatment?
Sorry, you cut out for me in the middle of the question.
Would you say that Jasco gave you guys the rock star treatment?
Yeah, I think so. I certainly felt like, having the crowd chant USA and cheer for me that much, I felt like a rock star at the end of that.
Okay.
I don't know if like dropping us off in the party bus at the liquor store was rockstar treatment, but it's like not. It's like rockstar adjacent at least.
It's we're at rock band performer treatment. We're at rock performer treatment. Well, I think it's really cool what Jasco's doing. Obviously you can harp here on like all the ways to improve, but I had an absolutely wonderful time. I'm glad you had an absolutely wonderful time, and
Absolutely.
I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to see you take home the whole tournament, man. I can't think of anyone better to win the big one.
Thank you, Sam.
Now, do you have any shout outs for the people before we take off here? Anyone you got to shout out to?
I mean, big shout out to my sponsor, rosterccg.com, the best place to fill all your My Hero Academia needs online. The best place to fill all your UNIVERSUS needs online. The best store for retro product. The old school Mortal Kombat, Cowboy Bebop, Yu Hakusho stuff. Yeah, Sean, great. We put on tournaments every once in a while. I think we're planning to put another one sometime circa Step 4 release online, another webcam tournament with a cash credit, whatever, prize purse. Looking forward to getting. I cast the last one of those. It had a blast, even with about 20 participants. I mean, a ton of really sick games all day. And I'm looking forward to getting to do that again. Shout out to Jasco Games and shout out to Step 4, League of Villains. It's really sweet. I'm excited to play that in sealed. Shout out to all the viewers. Shout out to everyone who made, in any way, contributed to the success of this game that helped make the Hero League Championship possible. It helped Jasco justify putting a stage up for me to get to play on for all of you.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for us this week, guys. You heard it from the man himself. Now you know how to go out there and play Midnight and win a world championship yourself. I've been Sam Tate. This is Kevin Broberg, the greatest of all time. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.